Today we will be dealing with Anglo-Politics. Now, you're most likely an English speaker living in one of the major English-speaking countries: Australia, New Zealand, Canada, United States, and the United Kingdom. So you probably may or may not have heard the term Anglosphere before. The term Anglosphere just refers to those 5 countries and because of their shared linguistic and cultural roots of the English-speaking world that dates back to England. The United Kingdom. We will be dealing with Anglo-Politics, and we'll first start off with the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. The UK is a parliamentary system, where you vote for a local representative to represent your area in Parliament, and then that member most likely is part of a party and will elect their party leader as the Prime Minister if they have a majority. Now, this is the usual per se, and this is where parliamentary systems come from in the world. They come from the UK. The Prime Minister's job is mostly to make sure that the Parliament and his majority do what he wants them to do and what the party, while the opposition tries to form a shadow government and tries to undermine the main party. The parliamentary system is used nearly everywhere in the Anglosphere except for the United States of America. The Labour Party only became mainstream in the early 1900s and overtook the long-running Liberal Party in the United Kingdom Parliament, a economically and socially left-wing party, or at least historically have been, and currently the United Kingdom Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, is a member of the Labour Party and has a Labour majority at 399 seats. You have to get at least 362 seats for a majority. However, some people have criticized Starmer for being too moderate and too centrist, and even some people call him a blue laborer. Now, something important to mind for the Americans in the audience is that blue is considered a color of the conservatives, while red is the color of radicalization and left-wing politics. In the America, it is reversed due to the 2000 election. The opposition currently in the UK Parliament is the Conservative Party, which the Conservative Party is one of the oldest surviving political parties in the world, alongside the United States Democratic Party. The Conservative Party is supposed to be a center-right on economics and social. However, the Conservative Party, or the Tories, used to be a different form of economics called One Nation conservatism, which is still capitalistic but still helps the workers. This has been phased out over time. The Conservative Party had been in charge for nearly 15 years, up until the most recent general election, where Keir Starmer was able to get 339 seats. Was able to get 399 seats in Parliament. Currently, the Conservative Party only has 199 seats within the United Kingdom Parliament, and the leader of the party is Kemi Badenoch, who is a controversial figure that is subject to rumors of potential replacement. Now, the UK does have a lot of smaller parties, including the Scottish National Party, the Plaid Cymru Party, the Ulster Unionist Party, a couple very small Green Party, and a couple other alliance parties based and centrists. Now, of course, these aren't the most popular ones or get that much media attention. We will be continuing on the other 2 political parties, specifically the Liberal Democrats. The Liberal Democrats were the return of the old Liberal Party within the UK before Labour overtook them. Liberal Democrats are a form of liberal and social democracy, open to a progressive taxation and some welfare benefits, but not a nationalization of industry. They are very socially liberal and are open to most free speech except for hate speech. The Liberal Democrats currently have 72 seats in Parliament, outnumbering the Scottish National Party, which had been historically the largest third party in the UK. Their leader, Ed Davey, also has the highest approval rating of any party leader at a -6. Even people who are not in favor of his policies have said he just seems like a decent bloke. The Liberal Democrats are also in favor of the legalization of weed. They range from center-left to center as of writing. The Reform UK Party is currently being headed by Nigel Farage, who was a man of a few controversies. Some people call the Reform UK party right-wing populist or just far right. Some also call it a neo-fascist party and compare it to the British Union of Fascists that was founded by Oswald Mosley. These accusations are not true. The Reform UK is a right-wing populist party that is in favor of free speech and limiting illegal immigration, and even some legal immigration. Even though there are only 5 seats in Parliament, they are making quite a ways in local councils and mayoralships. And Reform UK is very popular in the moment. When the next general election happens in 2029, there are talks about it becoming the next government, but we'll see from here on now. There is one criticism that both supporters and opposition have of Reform UK, and that is a lack of a foreign policy. Currently, the UK House of Commons is holding 650 seats, Labour as the majority, Conservative as the opposition, and the miscellaneous as the miscellaneous, full of other parties, as you can see on this graph here. One thing to hold on to the rest of the Anglo nations, save for New Zealand, is that all Anglo nations have a upper and lower house. In the UK's sense, they have the House of Commons, which is the house you'll often hear about, while their House of Lords is very small and doesn't do a whole lot. And you'll notice that in some other places too. Now let's move on to New Zealand. Their current government is a right-wing coalition. The centre-right party, called the National Party, which is similar to the UK's Conservative Party, who is a little more right-leaning than the UK's. The head of it, and now Prime Minister Christopher Luxon, is now reigning over the government. At 49 members of Parliament, the ACT Party, which is more of a right-leaning libertarian party for your American people, is a classical liberalism and conservative party that only has 11 members in Parliament. Then we have the most right-wing of the party, New Zealand First, a conservative nationalist party headed by a man who is half Scottish, half Maori of all things, which has caused some confusion in what loyalties he truly lies, and also his interesting claim of Maori are actually Hawaiians. 8 members of Parliament. The current opposition being Labour, whose head is Chris Hipkins, at 34 members of Parliament. While there are some smaller parties like Green and Maori representation, they did not able to form a coalition enough to become the government in comparison to the right-wing coalition. With the exception of America, New Zealand is the most right-wing party here. 4 out of the 5 Anglo nations has King Charles as the head of state. However, in New Zealand, Australia, and Canada, it is a little different, where they have a Governor-General who is appointed by the King to act on the King's behalf for the nation. So Canada, Australia, and New Zealand all have their own Governor-Generals to work on behalf of the King. The New Zealand Parliament is currently holding a 120-seat total. And the members of Parliament have a 3-year term limit. Now let's move on to Australia. Australia has a very similar model to the UK, but also mixed with the United States' model, where they have a state representatives called the Senate, which is 12 senators per state, making plus 2 for the territories, having a total of 76 senators, and they make decisions that are based on the state, while the House of Representatives is a 150-member house that are based on the population, and only they choose the Prime Minister. Now, each state does get a 5-person head start, which is interesting. Currently, the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese of the Labour Party, 94 seats, has been made some interesting news, as he recently was able to pass a law that outlawed people under 16 to access social media. Now, the opposition is a coalition of 2 parties, Liberal and National. Now, the Australian Liberal Party is not like the Liberal Democrats of the UK. In fact, the Liberal Party is the centre-right party that teams up with the right-wing party, the National. Just the National is more oriented to the South Australian Tasmania area. In total, they have 28 seats for Liberal and 15 seats for National. There are some crossbench parties that are not the opposition or the government, and they're very small. In fact, they also have 10 independents, which is the most any Anglo nation has. Their next election will be held in 2028, along with New Zealand's and the United States. The Canadian Parliament also has a Senate similar to Australia and America. However, it definitely operates more on the House of Lords system than really the Washington, D.C. system. It's very complicated, and we won't be getting into it here since it doesn't matter as much as the House of Commons. As a total of, in Canada, the House of Commons has 343 members. Currently, 169 of those members are part of the Liberal Party, which, in this case, they're very different from the Australian Liberal Party. The Canadian Liberal Party has more in common with the Labour parties of New Zealand and UK. More of a left-leaning social and economics. The government and leader and prime minister is Mark Carney, who looks like Duck Phillips from Mad Men. Opposition being 144 Conservatives, led by Pierre Poilievre, who did lose his seat in the recent election, but then got an entirely new seat. There are other parties, specifically the Bloc Québécois, a 22-member of parliaments holding in the House. They are a protest of the Quebec people trying to have some representation and more autonomy. A center-left nationalist party within Canada. They're conservative in terms of conserving Quebec's policies and traditions and history, but not conservative in terms of conserving the Canadian history. Something important to note, and you actually see that a lot with the Scottish National Party and Plaid Cymru and a lot of and even some Irish parties. That's something really important that not a whole lot of nations have. They also have the New Democratic Party, which is a center-left to left-wing party, and the leader, which is far more socialist in some aspects of the economy, and are only holding 7 seats in Parliament. There's also the Green Party, which is only 1 seat. And normally I would not talk about a party that only has 1 seat, but I feel like Elizabeth May, the leader, is very interesting since she believes America should be held for crimes against the environment due to 9/11. The Twin Towers. Yeah. Okay. Now the USA is a notable aspect, is notable amongst the Anglosphere for not being a parliamentary system, or having King Charles as the head of state, but rather it is a presidential system. Usually that is when the president, aka the head of government, is elected by the people, directly. Although the US is slightly different from those of South America and parts of Europe and Africa, because the president isn't directly elected by the people. The people vote on how the state should vote, and the electors who represent the state vote based on the people. So it is a little more complicated than just that's how the people vote. The US Congress is a lot like Australia's, where it's divided into 2 chambers, a House of Representatives and a Senate, which represents the states. In fact, that's where Australia gets the system from. The Senate has 2 senators per state instead of Australia's 12. The US Senate has 2 senators per state, making up a 100 Senate House, while there are 435 members of the House of Representatives who are based on the population. However, it has been capped since the early 1900s. And it's most likely not going to change unless a law is passed changing it. Now, and then there are the 2 parties, the Republicans and Democrats. While they do use a very similar voting system with the UK, America only has 2 parties due to it is just a large nation, and these parties are more like coalitions filled with other parties. In fact, you can look up the caucuses of each party and see that they're really made up of different factions. Now, there are some similarities with the presidential and parliamentary system. Usually, the prime minister is the head of the party. Same with the president. Once the president is elected into office, they automatically become the head of the party. The Senate has 53 Republicans, making it the majority, 45 Democrats, and 2 independents that caucus with the Democrats, that being Angus King of Maine and Bernie Sanders of Vermont. The House of Representatives has 219 Republicans and 213 Democrats, with 3 seats vacant. President Donald J. Trump is a member of the Republican Party and the second president to be elected non-consecutively. Now, this is a slightly more of an opinion piece / speculation. There's been lots of criticisms on Donald J. Trump as president by both conservatives and Democrats, but might not be what you think. One criticism is he is a MAGA Maoist, where he is Make America Great Again, but has a lot of Mao influence. Now, the Americans don't understand. This is more like classical European conservatism. Conservatives want to nationalize aspects of industry to make their nation succeed because they are nationalists for it. Trump is doing that. He is becoming more of a traditional European conservative before our very eyes in that aspect, in terms of business. While the Republican Party has historically been very skeptical to industrialization of economy and regulation of economy, and have been very socially right-wing, there is a change of being more interventionist in economy now, and still being very right-wing socially. Now, the Democrat Party is very left-wing socially and left-wing economically, with a few exceptions, of course, for both sides. The U.S. does not have a King Charles as their head of state. There is a special relationship between the U.S. and the U.K. In fact, most recently, there was a royal banquet with President Trump and King Charles, where they talked about America and Britain's relationship. Trump saying special does not even begin to describe it. And Charles replying with very much the idea of both their nation's men have died for values they hold dear together. Whether you agree or disagree with the Anglosphere, you can't deny there are a lot of similarities, both culturally and linguistically, even legally. We have something called English common law, which is held by nearly all of the Anglosphere, except for Louisiana and Quebec. Now, as you can see, there is more closer ties, and especially with President Trump's visit to the UK, perhaps those ties are getting closer. We don't know for sure, but there are an idea of a united Anglosphere, or some type of Anglosphere union. Even the Washington Post has mentioned this once. So whether you love or hate the Anglosphere, you can't deny its shared culture and history, and perhaps there will be more news outlets that will focus on the Anglosphere. But nonetheless, you have learned what Anglo-Politics are and how we operate. I hope you enjoy, and God bless.